In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make a simple mouth-watering ceviche using whole foods to deliver a flavor-packed, refreshing punch to your taste buds. You can use this as a go-to anytime you have access to freshly caught fish. Ceviche is the perfect food for a hot day. Critical to this recipe is pretty much any fresh-caught seafood, and I'm using about 1.5 pounds of flounder here, 6 limes, a bunch of cilantro, a bell pepper, tortilla chips, a red onion, garlic, and salt. Using fresh fish makes all the difference in the world when making ceviche. My friends and I actually caught this flounder on a fishing trip to Beaufort, North Carolina recently. Flounder makes some of the best ceviche in my parts of the world, which traditionally uses snapper, tuna, or conch down in Mexico and other parts of South America. The hardest part about this recipe, other than catching the flounder, is removing the skin from the fillet. Flounder's a thin, flaky white fish, so you must use a really flexible and extremely sharp knife. But my buddy, Captain Matt, with 1T, this guy right here, taught me this technique to remove the skin and preserve the integrity of the fillet. Like the tortoise, slow and steady wins the race, and you must apply constant pressure to the skin you've already cut as you gently glide and inch the knife forward, letting the quick saw-like motion and sharp blade do all the work. If you instead channel your inner hair here, you'll just rip the skin, mangle the fillet, and be left with a mess you can turn into fish stew instead. Sounds gross. Every year, some of my very best friends, we've got C-Dub, Single T, and BCEME here on this planet, and I take a trip and charter an inshore fishing boat with the GOAT redfish hunter, Captain Nick, out of Chasing Tales in Morehead City. No free ads. These are guys who I've known since before we had hair on our chest. We're all in my wedding and friends I trust with my life. It was an uncharacteristically hot day in October this year in Beaufort, and after we got off the boat, C-Dub, this guy right here, check out that beautiful red drum, had the genius idea to make some ceviche with the flounder we caught. After removing all the skin from the flounder fillets, I want you to cut the fillets into thinner strips and then chop the strips into cubes. Roughly evenly sized chunks are somewhat important because you want the citrus from the lime juice to cook the chunks evenly. In terms of order of operations, it's important to chop the fish up first and place the chunks in a bowl because the first thing you want to do with your ceviche is get some salt and garlic going on the fish chunks before adding the citrus and fresh veggies. As a believer in the slow foods movement, I always try to use fresh garlic instead of the processed jarlic you'll find at the store. This elephant garlic clove is from Poppy's garden and perfect for the ceviche. After you mince a clove or two depending on the size, add the minced garlic and 2 teaspoons of Himalayan salt to coat the fish. Adding the salt and garlic first does something magical to the fish before packing it full of citrus flavor. I'm no expert chef or food scientist, but I think it helps with tenderizing the meat and allowing the citrus and garlic flavor to penetrate the meat more. Osmosis or something like that. Anyways, just let this flounder garlic salt mixture sit while you prep the rest of the ingredients. For about 1.5 pounds of flounder, 2 teaspoons of salt and 4 to 6 limes should be the right proportions. For the limes, always roll them before you cut to maximize juice potential. There's nothing more frustrating than buying fresh limes, cutting into them only to squeeze out a couple drops of juice. Rolling them is one way to improve juice volume, but the real secret is learning how to pick out the best limes. One trick I know is to look for limes with smooth skin, kind of like this one. If the lime has bumpy skin, it generally will not juice well. Use those to throw in your gin and tonic or painkillers to make it look cool. My mom always taught me great food starts with great produce, and limes are no different, so do yourself a favor and learn how to pick out a good one. I do need some tips for how to pick out a good cantaloupe or pineapple. I seem to always miss on those. I'm starting with 4 limes and checking here. You want just enough lime juice to cover most of the fish. 4 was enough, but if you bought those bumpy limes, not bumpy lines, get out your head out of the gutter. You might need 6. Everything we have done so far is technique oriented and should be followed closely to build the foundation for a good ceviche. Everything after this can be personal preference, and I encourage you to try different ingredients or flavor combinations. I love red onion, so I'm going to thinly slice half of a red onion next. Flounder, that's these guys right here, has always been one of North Carolina's best inshore fish to catch and eat, but recently due to overfishing, the NC Marine Fishing Commission has essentially outlawed residential fishermen from catching flounder. And I won't go into the reasons why, but Captain Single T Matt will gladly explain over a cocktail or two. My brother is a marine biologist whose important work at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute helps inform fishing quotas, so I take these restrictions seriously, and I need the record to show these flounder were caught legally thanks to the GOAT inshore fishing Captain Nick and his commercial fishing license. After you've diced the red onion, I've elected to add a bit of sweetness with half of a red bell pepper. The red onion adds great flavor, and the raw onion flavor will be tamed by the lime juice. The bell pepper adds some nice sweetness, but both of these will help create an addictive, crunchy textural contrast with the soft, tender fish. After the bell pepper's diced up, I'm going to add a very healthy amount of fresh cilantro, one of my favorite herbs. Did you know that a decent chunk of the population, roughly 5 to 15%, depending on the demographic, have a taste aversion to cilantro? They will all uniquely say it tastes like they're eating soap. So next time someone refuses to eat cilantro in something delicious you've cooked for them, don't take it personally, it's just their genetics. I, fortunately, won the game of Punnett Square Bingo and love cilantro, so I'm going to add a lot to my ceviche. The last bit of prep here is to dice up a jalapeno. C-Dub, this guy, still had jalapenos producing in his garden in October, so he took advantage of that and used a fresh one. I always try to taste each jalapeno right after cutting it because every once in a while you can get a rogue one loaded up with Scoville steroids tasting more like a Carolina Reaper instead. I'm going to use the whole thing here, but don't forget to scrub your hands well after handling any type of hot pepper, especially before you use the bathroom. All the prep is done, and it's been about 5 to 10 minutes since the lime juice went into the fish, and you can already see how the citrus is cooking the raw meat, changing its color. I want the veggies to maintain a good crunch, so I'm just going to add the pile of veggies to the top of the fish until it's covered and then put the bowl back in the refrigerator. The next part of the recipe is important to follow closely too. You want the fish to marinate in the citrus for 20 to 60 minutes depending on the size of the chunks. You definitely don't want it to marinate for too long because the fish will become tough and chewy. There's a sweet spot, and this batch was in the lime juice for about 30 minutes. Ceviche has a rich history and is one of those techniques and flavor combinations perfected over generations and generations of time, pairing perfectly with a hot summer day, good friends, and a cold beer. Dave Chang always talks about how much he likes dishes which have good textural contrast, and ceviche hits a grand slam, shout out Freddie Freeman, when you eat it with crunchy tortilla chips. It's unbeatable. As always, I believe if you embrace slow foods, discover new flavors, and cook with love for those you love most in the world, you can change your life. And in case you all were wondering what we did after we ate the amazing ceviche appetizer we cooked, we did what any smart person would do, found a local dive bar, played some pool, and crushed double cheeseburgers from the flat top. A perfect day.